Chief Minister, of course, it's been a very hectic, busy day. I don't know if you agree with me. Today was complete and utter, unequivocal vindication of the abuse survivors and victims. They were believed today, the first time they have been believed in decades by this care inquiry. Do you agree?
I absolutely do. And for my part, I think that was a really important reason to have the care inquiry in the first place, that was fully independent of us. I know over coming days people are going to say, oh well, they maybe should have said this and they didn't look at that properly. The most important thing is that we've got this document of around 1,000 pages long, and it's telling people stories that the report tells us they weren't listened to, they've not been heard, and I have been saying all day that I want every States member to read this. I want every Islander to read it, because I think only when they read those stories, as harrowing as they are, because they're difficult to read. Some of them you can't read more than a sentence and you have to stop because you can't believe what's happened to them. As harrowing as they are, it's in reading those stories that I think we can galvanise action to deliver the recommendations, and that in itself will be a first for Jersey.
Well, I suppose, I mean, now you just, because you said there's harrowing, you've said there's harrowing and brutal stories. I know there is, I've listened to them at the care inquiry itself. But this is where sort of I come into the terms of reference of the care inquiry. I haven't heard of these brutal and harrowing stories on the mainstream media over here. I've heard of people being flicked with towels in the showers. So I suppose, do you think that the media's reporting on this has formed public opinion, probably against the victims and survivors?
It's not for me to comment or criticise media reporting, because, Neil, sometimes, like you, I look at it from a different angle and I think they've got that story wrong.
But I mean, not to mention the stories is what I'm saying, and what I'm getting at here.
But for me, we have to firstly today commit ourselves to reading this, to reading these difficult stories, because what we know what happens is you get a headline and then the story moves on. We can't let ourselves move on without really and fully hearing those stories, trying the best we can to understand what happened, and then using that as a springboard to really change.
Well, I suppose a lot of criticism has come again from the media. Is like, look, this cost 23 million quid. You know, this, and a lot of that blame has been shifted in certain circles on victims and survivors. My argument is that if the States of Jersey over these decades hadn't covered up this child abuse, there would be no need for this inquiry and no need for £23 million. I solely put the blame of these £23 million on the States of Jersey. What's your...
Well, I've only read so far the executive summary and some around the findings, because obviously it's only been released at 3 o'clock. So what the chairman said, she didn't use the word cover up in her statement, but we need to look at the details to see actually what happened in all of these various cases. So I'm not in a position to use that word today, but I do agree with the rest of the sentiment that if there hadn't have been decades of abuse and terrible treatment of children and not listening to them, we wouldn't have needed the inquiry.
Well, let me put it another...
And because that happened, we needed the inquiry, and we should not, and I hope nobody does, blame the victims of abuse and those that suffered. It's not them that should be blamed for the need for the inquiry. It's the institutions and those who were running and responsible for those institutions throughout these decades. And this report says that they failed miserably.
And the report also says that they're not exactly, well, I don't know if failing's the right word, but they've said that they can't guarantee that children are safe in the care of the states today.
Well, they said they may still not be appropriately protected. And for me, that is what really challenges to make sure that we deliver on the recommendations. Now, whilst the report's been underway, we have been making changes. We've allocated millions of pounds more. We've brought in, now recruited permanent positions into social services and the heads of services, all from the United Kingdom. We had Jo Olsen, and her evidence, I think, is what led the panel
reports, wasn't it?
To talk about their concerns about current services. Jo, together with the Minister, agreed the instruction of independent audits. There were 4 of them, the Mary Varley reports, as you talk about, and they showed that then, in 2015, services were not where people were being told they were, and they were still failing children. And that's what led to the extra millions that we've allocated and the use of people from the UK. And the report talks quite a lot about the need for proper independent review, proper independent oversight, Children's Commissioner, children's rights officers.
But did we need a report to tell us that? Well, I mean, isn't that just common sense? Isn't that just normal?
Well, the report also talks about something that it refers to as the Jersey Way. And that is that it suggests that we haven't always used proper independent people, independent oversight. And I think that this report actually is part of the cultural change that's needed.
So critics like me and sceptics like me, the Jersey Way, and to a lot of the survivors, as we've heard all through it given evidence, means corruption, collusion, judicial corruption, cover-up. What does the Jersey Way mean to you?
I don't use that term.
Well, if I'm using it, if I use it, what would you?
What I think it means to in the report is that they have suggested that there wasn't proper oversight, that things were dealt with in an inappropriate way, that people behaved in a way which may or may not have been acceptable at the time in how they dealt with people who were complaining and telling their story that they've been abused. And that absolutely cannot go on.
When you gave evidence as part of phase 3C, 3D, you told the chairperson that you couldn't guarantee that you could have the recommendations implemented. You've said today that you want to implement them, but surely with collective responsibility, you can have them all the recommendations implemented.
The recommendations will be agreed by the States Assembly. You're right, I get criticised if I encourage ministers to do things, and I get criticised if I just let them do their own thing. I think that every minister reading this report will want to see the recommendations implemented, and I think that when we're working out how much money it's going to take and the number of people it's going to take, I think that ministers will accept that it's absolutely necessary. I think, like me, ministers will accept that delivering the recommendations in this report between now and the next election has got to be our number one priority. Of course, all the other bits of government will go on, but we cannot let these stories fail. And that, I think, if ministers read it, if states members read it, if the public read it, it will be the start of the cultural change that this report shows we need.
Well, that is, you touched on that. They said we need a cultural change. We need to, the Care Inquiry suggested that we go back to the Jersey Way. I'm not going to rake over it again, but you've got a job on your hands, haven't you? And I think you're capable of it, if I'm to be fair, is to swing public opinion around, to start getting some trust back in ministerial governments. I don't think you can get the trust. It's not your, I don't know if it's your job to get the trust back in the judicial system, but certainly in the political system, you've got a job on your hands, haven't you, to have the Jersey Way portrayed as something good, something positive, which was a recommendation basically of the Care Inquiry.
I don't think we should be talking about the Jersey Way. The report talks about the Jersey Way in a negative way, which I understand what it's saying. I think we should just talk about doing things the right way and changing our culture. I've said already that the ministerial system, as it's currently constituted, is not working, I don't think, fully in the interests of the public, and we need to change it. And the report also says we should look at Clothier and we should look at Carswell again.
Well, I totally agree with that. Now, in the report today, it said that the former Home Affairs Minister, Andrew Lewis, lied to the States Assembly, and he lied to the care inquiry itself. That's they use those words in their report. So if the care inquiry is to be believed, we've got a liar in our states. Are you going to be looking to remove him in any way? Can you bring a vote of no confidence against him? Would you support a vote of no confidence against him?
Deputy Andrew Lewis has issued a statement today.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I am of the view that he is elected by the public. What the inquiry has said today needs to be properly investigated by Privileges and Procedures.
I asked
Committee.
Privileges and Procedures, I asked PPC to look at it, and they refused.
I think that what's said in this report means that they have no choice but to look at it.
Well, we can wrap it up now, Chief Minister. Now, you have obviously been a supporter of this inquiry all the way through it. You managed to get extra funding for it. I believe you want to do the right thing by it. To your mind, is it money well spent?
Yes. I believe that this government and the last 11 months of this government will be judged on how it deals with these recommendations and how it delivers them. I know we're coming to the end, so if we are coming to the end, I want to thank you as well, Neil and Voice for Children, because I know you have persistently reminded us that we should listen more to children, and this report vindicates what you've been saying about listening to children as well. So I think we should thank you as well for that.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your time, Chief Minister.
Thank you.